Welcome back. After watching the first video on creating a strong emotional foundation in children during their early years, with focus onto the building blocks of emotional development, let us gradually move on to the role of educator in creating or establishing a strong foundation towards the emotional maturity. At the end of this video on creating a strong emotional foundation, you will be able to infer the role of educator in creating a strong emotional foundation distinctively for infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. This section of the module identifies strategies to be employed by early childhood educators to provide support for the children towards laying a strong emotional foundation. A strong emotional foundation, as discussed earlier, enhances the ability to initiate and develop healthy relationships, cope up with challenges, and realize their own identity. Researchers also do observe that a strong emotional foundation in early childhood years positively impact the child's attitudes and behavior in their future, the display of academic performance and achievement path, the track towards their career, and overall the derivation of holistic outcomes. As and when we start to realize the significance of creating an emotional foundation, now the question of how to create the same sets in. The strategies to be adopted cannot be the same for the whole lifespan of the early years. It should vary with the individual needs and the developmental characteristics and concerns. Hence, the strategies would be discussed under three major subheads, namely creating emotional foundation among infants, creating emotional foundation among toddlers, and creating emotional foundation among preschoolers. These strategies would deal with the three major aspects among all age groups. One is to create a predictable, nurturing environment, support social skills, recognize and talk about emotions. Toddlers and preschoolers, one more aspect would be added, which would encourage positive disciplinary practices among them. The first is for infants. Create a predictable, nurturing environment. A safe, secure, and affectionate environment from the time of birth is a crucial element to establish a strong psychological foundation. But how can it be achieved? Given are some of the strategies. First one, talk, read, and sing together. Infants learn by interaction with others and the environment. So, sing and talk with them every day so that the child feels loved and special. Provide warm and responsive, consistent care. So cuddle the child whenever needed. Smile and laugh with them all through the day. Try to read them with the cues they provide you and fulfill their needs in a sensible manner. The third strategy is maintain orderly and predictable routines. Showing cues that all essential need of the child is fulfilled helps a child to feel safe and secure. However, while trying to take care of the needs, try to follow an orderly routine, for example, regular feeding or sleeping time. Most important, be aware of the child by following their lead. Closely following the child helps an adult to be mindful of the needs and desires of the child, and in turn can plan routine activities based on their interests and needs. The second major strategy for infants is support children to develop social skills. As it is a proven fact that social skills determine the attitude towards lifelong learning and the level of happiness, how to foster it? The first way is play simple games with infants. Games like peekaboo, taking turns going back with the same rhythm, or some simple games to establish the art of taking turns, which facilitates better social development. Second, be a role model. As Bandura has observed, the child learns through observation. Hence, the adult should be a perfect role model for the child to imitate. The live model, when exhibits kindness, appropriate expression of joy, and calm handling the situation, helps the child to learn how to behave and imitate the child's facial expressions and sounds. When the adults imitate certain activities of the child in turn learns the skills of imitation. And the third aspect is to recognize and talk about emotions. Encourage the child to articulate their feelings that might be positive or negative, so that the child learns to express appropriate emotions. The tips include Attempt to read the moods of the child. Learn to read the emotions of the child and respond appropriately. Help the child to calm himself. Thumb sucking is okay for specific reasons that the babies soothe themselves, and moreover, it is said to be the first step in managing emotions. So sometimes allow thumb sucking. The third is articulate the feelings of the child. By saying, "Oh, you look delighted today," the child recognizes that he is being attended to. Now on to the second aspect, that is creating emotional foundation among toddlers. As already told to you, first is create a predictable, nurturing environment. A nurturing physical environment with certain positive social and environmental elements facilitates the learning and exploration potential of the child. Moreover, the social and emotional factors that foster positive interactions and relationship. But how to create such an environment? Greet every child at arrival. Make eye contact and greet them with pleasure and by calling out their name. Use any opportunity that needs one-to-one interaction. The facilitator may use any opportunity to have a one-to-one smile, a hug, or even an approaching word. Provide developmentally appropriate and safe play equipments and books. Safe access of the books and toys helps the child to use and explore it independently. The next aspect is maintain orderly daily routine. A child should understand the order of routine activities to develop a own sense of control over the events. Most important is, as an educator, respond differently to a different child. As each child is unique, the educator should respond differently to separate children and have a right balance of learning and play, active and quiet activities, etc. As an early learning center, celebrate common festivals and celebrations. To develop a sense of appreciation towards a culture, the educator should organize common festivals and celebrations. The second aspect is support children to develop social skills. The social skills of the toddlers get fostered through interaction with parents and caregivers at home and with the educators at school. To promote the social skills of the toddlers, the educators should provide opportunities for group activities. Maybe you can set a target and allow the children to play in a group. This group play will enable them to open up and have better interaction. And the educator should provide choices for the child to indulge in an activity. As much as possible, provide varied choices for the child to choose an activity based on his or her interest. The choices offered to them in turn helps them to feel heard, attended, or engaged. The educator should model positive dispositions like sharing and taking turns. Certain positive dispositions like sharing and taking turns has to be demonstrated by the educator herself. Encourage friendships. Toddlers usually indulge in parallel play, but the educator should give a chance for them to play with peers rather than play next to the peer. The early friendships lay a strong foundation towards the development of social skills. And the third is recognize and talk about emotions. Recognizing and articulating the true feelings and emotions are the key aspects of healthy emotional development. Certain tips for the educators include: talk about emotions. It might be through stories and role plays. Identify and discuss the emotions of the characters in a way that the child can understand. And also, the educator should articulate your own feelings and emotions. By articulating one's own feelings, you serve as a model for the child to express his or her emotions. And the educator should offer comfort and confidence. The child should realize that it is okay to have some negative feelings like anger or fear. Reassure them that you are there for him to cope with these emotions. The educator also should teach the child to handle emotions. Try to make the child learn strategies to deal with their emotions. For example, soothe them with a hug. The fourth is different from infants, which is to encourage positive behaviors and disciplinary practice. Setting up limits or boundaries with lots of encouragement and motivation helps a child to develop positive behaviors. Some of the key strategies that has to be adopted by the educator are: set up realistic expectations. As an educator, be aware of the milestones to be accomplished by a child for that particular age. In other words, they have developmentally appropriate expectations. For example, do not expect a small child to sit in a place for a long time, as it is the age of curiosity and discovery, and you don't want the child to move around. Provide them with some materials that can keep them occupied. The second is, be a positive role model, as already told to you. The educator should show themselves as a model for the child to adopt positive behaviors. The third aspect is, set limits in a subtle manner. Toddlers are just becoming aware of the rules and regulations, so be calm and patient in setting them the limits. The most important one to develop disciplinary practices is provide positive feedback. Feedback is essential, but the positive feedback, when used aptly, reinforces a child to adopt positive behaviors. And the third is for the toddlers. Along with the tips that have been provided for the toddlers, specific additional tips under each of the 4 subheads are given below for the educator to adopt it while dealing with children. The first common strategy is creating a predictable and nurturing environment. Creating a strong sense of community becomes a prime outcome of creating a predictable, nurturing environment for preschoolers. Hence, the educator should provide warm, consistent, and responsive care. This sort of care allows the child to feel confident and independent to solve the problem. The second is, use gathered information of the child to further their learning. Through observations and assessment, the educator collects knowledge about the child, and she has to use this information to enhance their learning. The third is, prompt children that a transition is going to happen. To get the children to move from one activity to the other, it becomes so challenging. Hence, the educator should provide prompts or warning by saying that in 5 minutes, we have to move to the library. And never mind giving additional reminders also. The second aspect is support children to develop social skills. As preschoolers engage in pretend play, the educator should adopt specific tips to encourage cooperative play and develop early friendships, for which they should use daily activities to foster social skills. Most of the routine activities can be used to help children practice turn-taking, group play, and positive interactions. Realize that some child can involve easily, whereas others need a push behind. So it is your role to push them from behind. Then the second aspect is encourage pretend play. Motivate the child to develop and enact a role play. This for sure would help the child to analyze the roles and responsibilities of a person. The third strategy is use kids' book to foster social skills. Provide books for children that can involve in group reading or taking turns in reading. The third aspect is recognize and talk about emotion. The preschoolers have got the potential to label and discuss their emotions. So the educator, along with practicing the tips that is mentioned for the toddler, they have to let the child know that their emotion matters. The educator should make the child realize that he is heard or listened, to praise as well as give constructive feedback to the child when he or she articulates their feeling. The educator also should allow the child to others' feelings. For example, the educator, while narrating a story, ask him how he would feel and why. This activity helps the child to understand and recognize others' feeling. And the last aspect is to encourage positive behaviors and disciplinary practices. The child's ability to make choices and clear display of behavior enhances during preschool years. Hence, the work of an educator also becomes more complicated. The educator is supposed to do the following to foster strong emotional foundation. The first is, the expectations in terms of behavior should be communicated clearly to the child. Discuss clearly what and how the child is expected to behave. Give a vivid idea of what is acceptable behavior and what is not. The second most important aspect is teach children of certain calm down strategies. The educator should stay with the child calmly when they don't exhibit tantrums and hurt themselves or others. Certain calming down strategies can be taught to the child. Take the child to a quiet place and practice deep breathing with him or her. Ask the child to portray the situation that made them upset and ask them to narrate story based on it. Provide a soft toy for a child who is angry. And the last aspect is try to engage the child in problem solving. Provide activities that will make the child solve problems concerning taking turns and cooperating. Now to conclude, the module on creating a strong emotional foundation brought to you in the form of 2 videos introduced the significance of the 3 interrelated aspects of emotional development, namely social interaction, emotional awareness, and self-regulation. Moreover, the 5 key building blocks to be strengthened for a strong emotional foundation was identified, and each of its contribution to the emotional growth was signified. The last section of the module dealt with the crucial aspect of the course by bringing out the strategies to be adopted by the educator in facilitating young children to have a stable emotional growth. Bye.